The minivan had been parked in the same corner of the McDonald's lot every night for 7 weeks. Not a customer, not an employee. The windows fogged from the inside, 4 sets of lungs breathing in a sealed car. A blanket pinned across the rear glass so no one could see in. Malcolm Davis sat in his Mercedes 6 spaces away, with the engine off. This was the 3rd night he had come here. He did not know who was inside that van. He did not know why he kept coming back. He would know both before this night was over. Malcolm Davis drove at night the way some people drink. Not to get anywhere, just to keep moving. He had done it since he was 12 years old. Back then, it was his mother behind the wheel. A 1996 Honda Civic with a cracked dashboard and a back seat that smelled like laundry detergent because Dorothy Davis kept their clothes in garbage bags in the trunk when they had nowhere else to keep them. She would drive loops through the south side of Chicago at 2 in the morning. 3 in the morning, because the shelters were full, and sitting still in a parked car felt too much like giving up. Moving felt like you were going somewhere, even when you were not. Malcolm was 52 now. He lived in a penthouse on the Oakland Hills, with floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the entire East Bay. He had not needed to drive at night in decades. But the body remembers what the bank account forgets. When sleep would not come, he drove. No route, no destination. Just the weight of the steering wheel, and the sound of tires on asphalt, and the city sliding past in the dark like something he could watch without being part of. That first night, he pulled into the McDonald's on International Boulevard at 11:14. Drive-through, black coffee. The lot was almost empty. 3 cars near the entrance. A delivery truck idling by the dumpsters. And 1 vehicle parked in the far corner backed against the chain-link fence at the edge of the lot. A Honda Odyssey minivan. Dark blue, though it was hard to tell under the sodium lights. Older model. The rear windows were covered from the inside, not tinted, covered. A blanket, pinned or taped across the glass so that nothing inside was visible from the outside. Malcolm noticed the position first. The van was not parked where a customer would park. It was in the darkest corner of the lot where the overhead light had burned out or been broken, but still within the angle of the security camera mounted above the drive-through window. Whoever parked there had chosen the spot, not randomly, deliberately. They knew the lot, they knew the camera. They knew exactly how much visibility they needed and how much darkness they could afford. He did not know yet why that detail mattered to him. He would understand later. But in the moment he just sat in his Mercedes with the coffee cooling in his hand and looked at the van through his side mirror. The windows were fogged, all of them. Condensation from the inside. Not rain, not cold air meeting warm glass from the outside. Breath. Someone was breathing inside that van. More than one person based on the amount of fog covering every window. Then he saw it. A small hand appeared on the inside of the passenger window. A child's hand. It pressed flat against the glass and dragged downward, clearing a narrow streak through the condensation. For less than 2 seconds, he could see the outline of a small face looking out through the gap. Then, the hand disappeared. The fog closed back over the streak within a minute. Malcolm did not get out of his car. He did not walk over. He did not call anyone. He sat there for another 4 minutes. Then he put the Mercedes in drive and pulled out of the lot. The drive home took 11 minutes. International Boulevard to the freeway to the hill to the gate to the garage to the elevator to the penthouse, where every room was climate-controlled and every surface was clean and every window looked down on a city that Malcolm had spent 20 years learning how to profit from without ever having to stand. Inside it, he set the coffee on the kitchen counter. He did not drink it. He stood at the window that faced west toward the flatlands, toward International Boulevard, toward a parking lot he had never noticed before tonight. The hand on the glass stayed with him, not as an image, as a weight. Something had pressed against the inside of that window, the way something now pressed against the inside of his chest. Small, brief, already gone. He did not sleep that night. That was not unusual. What was unusual was the reason. He went back the next night. He told himself he was just driving. He told himself the coffee was the reason. He parked 6 spaces away and turned off his headlights and watched the same van in the same corner with the same fogged windows and the same blanket over the rear glass. Nothing happened. A phone light flickered inside the van for 20 minutes. Someone was using the McDonald's Wi-Fi. The light went off. The van was still. Malcolm drove home. He did not sleep. The third night he arrived at 10:15. He parked. He waited. At 10:28 the van pulled into the lot. Same spot, same angle, backed against the fence. The engine ran for 3 minutes, then shut off. The blanket went up over the rear windows from the inside. The fog began forming within 10 minutes. He stayed until 5:30 in the morning. At 5:32, the driver's door opened. A woman stepped out. He saw her for the first time. She was tall. She moved quickly. She opened the sliding door on the passenger side. He heard her voice. Quiet, steady. The voice of someone waking children who needed more sleep than they were going to get. 3 children came out of that van. The oldest was a boy, maybe 8 or 9. He stood on the pavement and put on his backpack without being told. The youngest was still in a diaper. She held him on her hip. The middle child was a girl, maybe 5 or 6. The woman set the toddler in a car seat that she pulled from behind the driver's seat. Then she stood in the McDonald's parking lot at 5:37 in the morning with a comb and a spray bottle and did her daughter's hair. 2 braids, even parts. The girl stood still on the asphalt in sneakers that were clean. The toddler started crying in the car seat. The woman picked him up with one arm and kept braiding with the other. She finished both braids. She loaded the children. She drove out of the lot heading north, toward the school district. Malcolm sat in his Mercedes and did not move for 6 minutes after she left. The parking space, where the van had been, was empty. The asphalt was still warm from the engine. He drove home. He did not sleep. The 4th night he saw something he had not expected. At 11:40, a man in a McDonald's uniform came out the side door carrying a brown paper bag. He walked to the van. He did not knock. He placed the bag on the ground beside the front tire. He tapped the hood twice, lightly, like a signal that had been given before. Then he turned around and walked back inside without looking at the van once. No one opened the door. No one said thank you. The bag sat beside the tire for 4 minutes before a hand reached out from the driver's window and pulled it in. 2 taps on the hood. That was all. That was the entire language between them. He knows. She knows he knows. Neither of them has ever said a word about it. The man taps, the woman takes. And every night, that small economy of silence keeps something human intact in a parking lot that was never built for living. The 5th night, Malcolm arrived at 9:15. Before the van, he waited. She pulled in at 9:41. Engine ran for 3 minutes. Blanket went up. Fog started. At 10:08, a window cracked open. Not much, 2 inches, and Malcolm heard something he was not prepared for. A woman's voice. Reading. She was reading aloud to children inside that van. He could not make out the words. He did not need to. The cadence was enough. Slow, measured. The kind of rhythm that does not rush because rushing would defeat the entire point. She was reading the way you read when you are trying to build a room out of sound. When the walls around you are made of glass and metal, and the only architecture you can offer is your voice. Malcolm sat in his car with the window down and listened to a woman read bedtime stories in a parking lot at 10 o'clock at night. He did not know her name. He did not know how long she had been here. He did not know what had happened to her, or what had been taken, or by whom. He did not know yet that the company responsible for putting her in that van was a company he had built with his own hands. He just knew he was going to get out of the car tomorrow. Inside the van, the world was 4 feet wide and 6 feet long and held together by systems that had taken 7 weeks to build. Imani Carter had a method for everything. The middle row seats folded flat. That was the children's bed. A fitted sheet over the cushions. Pillows from the apartment she no longer had. A blanket for each child. The driver's seat reclined as far as it would go. That was her bed. It was not far enough. Her knees stayed bent every night. She had stopped noticing. The passenger seat held a plastic bin. Inside, 3 days of clean clothes, sorted by child. Jalen's stack on the left. Nia's in the middle. Carter's on the right. Under the bin, a 5-gallon water jug for washing faces and hands. A roll of paper towels. A Ziploc bag with 3 toothbrushes and a tube of toothpaste that was down to the last inch. Hanging from the headrest of the passenger seat, a clear plastic bag. Wet wipes. Hand sanitizer. A small bottle of detangling spray for Nia's hair. A comb. A brush. 2 ponytail holders. The trunk held everything else. 1 suitcase, 1 garbage bag of shoes, 1 box of shelf-stable food, peanut butter, crackers, applesauce pouches, granola bars. The box was never full and never empty. Imani kept it at exactly what she could afford after gas, and the $3 Happy Meal she bought the children every night so they had a reason to be in the McDonald's and she had a reason to park. She did not call this homeless. She called it in between where they had been and where they were going. That was the language she used with the children. We are in between right now. In between is not forever. In between is just the middle part of a story that has not finished yet. Jalen understood what in between meant. He was 9. He understood more than she wanted him to. Nia accepted it the way 6-year-olds accept what their mothers tell them, completely, without evidence, because the voice saying it was the only proof she needed. Carter was 2. He did not know what in between meant. He did not know what an apartment was. He did not remember the room where he was born. For Carter, the van was the world. The van had always been the world, and his mother was always in it. That was enough. That was the part that hurt the most. Not that her youngest son was living in a van, but that he had no idea anything was missing. Every night followed the same order. Park. Engine off. Blanket up. Wipes for hands and faces. Change into sleep clothes. Then Imani reached into the pocket behind the driver's seat and pulled out a paperback book so worn the spine had split 3 times and been taped back together with packing tape. Maya Angelou. And Still I Rise, her mother's copy. Renee Carter had bought it at a used bookstore in 1994 for $2. She had written in the margins, notes, dates, small thoughts that arrived between the lines of someone else's poetry and needed a place to land. On page 43 in handwriting that Imani would recognize anywhere Renee had written a single sentence in blue ink along the left margin. Home is not an address. Home is the voice that reads to you at night. Imani read that sentence to her children the first night they slept in the van. She has read it every night since. 49 nights, same page, same sentence, same voice. After the book, after the blanket adjustments, after Carter's breathing slowed and Nia stopped shifting and the van went quiet, one light stayed on. Jalen's phone flashlight, dim, angled into the pages of a composition notebook that he kept in his backpack during the day and under his pillow at night. He opened it to the next blank line. He wrote in handwriting that was getting steadier month by month. Things that are still good. Number 47. Mom's voice when she reads. Number 48. The McDonald's man left nuggets again. He closed the notebook. He turned off the light. He lay in the dark beside his sister and his brother and listened to his mother breathing in the front seat. Imani heard the pen stop. She heard the flashlight click off. She did not ask what he wrote. She never asked. Whatever was in that notebook belonged to him. It was the one thing in his life that no one had packed into a van or lost to an eviction notice or left behind in a building that someone else now owned. She let him keep it. She owed him that much. She owed him more than that, but that much she could give him tonight. Imani Carter was 31 years old. She was a certified nursing assistant at Emerald Grove Senior Living in East Oakland. Night shift, 11 at night to 7 in the morning. $19.50 an hour. She had held the job for 4 years. She had never missed a shift. Not when Jalen had the flu. Not when Nia broke her wrist on the playground. Not when her back seized so badly she had to dress herself lying on the floor because standing up was not available to her that morning. She showed up. That was what she did. That was what she had always done. She met Terrence Carter at a block party cookout on Foothill Boulevard when she was 22. It was July. The kind of Oakland summer afternoon where everything smells like charcoal and someone's speaker is playing too loud from a second-floor window and nobody minds. Terrence was standing behind a grill that did not belong to him cooking for people he had met 45 minutes ago. He was the best cook there, and he knew it, and he did not make a show of knowing it. He just cooked. He grilled corn a way Imani had never seen before. Butter on the cob before it went over the flame. Not after, he said his mother taught him that. The butter melts into the kernels instead of sitting on top. You taste it different. You taste it deeper. Imani remembered that detail 14 months later when she married him at the Alameda County Courthouse on a Tuesday afternoon. She remembered it the morning he died. She remembers it now in the van on the nights when the children are asleep and the parking lot is quiet and she has nothing to hold on to except the things that used to be true. Terrence was a construction worker, framing and drywall, mostly residential. He worked for a small outfit out of San Leandro. He was good with his hands. He was patient with measurements. He once spent an entire Saturday rebuilding a section of baseboard in their apartment because the previous tenant had done it crooked and he could not stop noticing. They rented a 2-bedroom apartment at Ridgewood Terrace on International Boulevard, 3rd floor, Unit 312. The living room window faced the courtyard, where a rusted swing set stood between 2 benches that no one had painted in years. Jalen took his first steps in the hallway outside that apartment. Imani was carrying groceries. Terrence was holding his phone, trying to record it. Jalen made it 6 steps before sitting down hard on the carpet and looking surprised at what he had just done. Nia said her first word in the kitchen. She was sitting in a high chair while Terrence spooned rice onto her plate. She pointed at the pot and said more. Not mama, not dada, more. She wanted what she wanted. She was specific about it from the beginning. Carter was born in the back bedroom at 3:17 in the morning. He came 5 weeks early. The contractions started at midnight. Terrence called 911 at 2:45. Carter arrived before the paramedics did. Terrence caught him. He had never held anything that small. He told Imani afterward that his hands were shaking so badly he was afraid he would drop the baby. He did not drop the baby. Every room in that apartment held something. A first step, a first word, a birth, $1,400 a month, 2 incomes. Imani and Terrence together made just enough, not comfortable, not secure, just enough to stay where they were and not think too hard about what would happen if one of those incomes disappeared. Imani's mother, Renee Carter, died of breast cancer when Imani was 19. Renee was 44. She had worked as a home health aide for 21 years. She did not leave money. She did not leave property. She left a paperback copy of Maya Angelou's And Still I Rise that she had bought at a used bookstore in East Oakland in 1994 for $2. The spine had been cracked and taped and cracked again. Renee wrote in the margins, small notes, dates, sometimes just a word. Sometimes a thought that arrived between someone else's lines and needed somewhere to go. Most of the notes were for herself. One was not. On page 43 in blue ink and handwriting that slanted slightly to the right, the way Renee's always did, she had written a single sentence along the left margin. Imani found it 3 days after the funeral. She has never stopped reading it. She did not know then that she would one day read that sentence to her children in a parked van in a McDonald's lot as proof that they still had a home. She did not know then that a sentence written in a margin could become the only architecture she had left. The apartment at Ridgewood Terrace cost $1,400 a month. 2 incomes covered it. 1 income did not. But before that math became the thing that ended everything, something else had to happen first. Terrence Carter died on March 14th. A scaffold collapse at a residential construction site in Hayward. He was 33 years old. He had been on the site for 6 weeks. The company he worked for, a small general contractor with 11 employees, had classified Terrence as an independent contractor, not an employee. The distinction matters in ways that most people never think about until it is the only thing that matters. When Imani filed for workers' compensation, the claim was denied. Terrence was not an employee. He was a contractor. Contractors are not covered. When she called about life insurance, there was none. The company did not offer benefits to contractors. When she contacted the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, an investigation was opened. It is still open. Investigations do not pay rent. Worker misclassification affects an estimated 10 to 30% of the construction labor force in the United States. When a contractor dies on a job site, the family receives no death benefits, no workers' compensation, no employer-sponsored life insurance. Not because the law does not protect them, because someone decided the law did not apply to them. Imani buried Terrence on a Saturday. The funeral cost $4,200. She borrowed most of it from 3 people and has paid back 2 of them, She went back to work the following Monday. She did not take bereavement leave, because bereavement leave is a benefit, and benefits are for employees with salaried positions, and Imani was hourly. She clocked in at 11 that night. She emptied bedpans and changed sheets, and held the hand of a 91-year-old woman who called her the wrong name, and she did not correct her because the wrong name was close enough and the woman needed someone to hold her hand more than she needed to be right. One income. $19.50 an hour. 40 hours a week before taxes. $1,400 a month for rent. Imani did the math every morning. She managed it for 4 months. The 5th month, a letter arrived. New management. Ridgewood Terrace had been acquired by a property investment firm based in the Bay Area. Improvements would be made. Rent would be adjusted to reflect market conditions. The new monthly rate for Unit 312 would be $1,960, a 40% increase. Imani called Legal Aid of Alameda County. A lawyer helped her file a dispute. The dispute bought her 4 months. 4 months of letters. 4 months of hearings. 4 months of a system that moved slowly enough to look like it was working, but never slowly enough to actually protect the person inside it. Then the code enforcement notice arrived. The 2nd bedroom window did not meet egress requirements. Fire safety. The same window that had been in that apartment for 6 years. The same window that had passed every inspection when the old management had no reason to look for problems. The new management had a reason. The eviction order came on a Wednesday. Imani had 14 days. She did not fight it. She had used up fighting. She packed what fit into the van. Clothes, dishes stayed. The children's winter coats, toys stayed. The composition notebook Jalen had been writing in since his father died. The Maya Angelou paperback with her mother's handwriting in the margins. The car seat. The 5-gallon water jug she had bought at a hardware store because she already knew what was coming. On the last morning, she loaded the children into the van in the parking lot of Ridgewood Terrace. Jalen climbed in without being told. He put on his seatbelt and looked straight ahead. Carter was on her hip. Nia stood on the pavement and looked up at the building. "Are we going home tomorrow?" Imani knelt down. She looked at her daughter. She said the only thing she could think of that was not the truth. "We are going somewhere better." She did not know where somewhere better was. She knew it was not here. She knew that her credit score now carried an eviction record that would follow her for 7 years. She knew that no landlord in Alameda County would approve an application with that record. She knew the shelters were full. She had called 4 of them. The shortest wait list was 9 months. She drove out of the parking lot of the building where her son had taken his first steps, and her daughter had said her first word, and her youngest had been born in the back bedroom 5 weeks early, while his father's hands were shaking. She drove to the McDonald's on International Boulevard. She parked in the far corner. She put up the blanket. She turned off the engine. That was the first night. Jalen Carter. 9 years old, 4th grade at Garfield Elementary. His reading level was above average. His attendance was perfect. His teacher, Miss Boateng, did not know he slept in a van. Nobody at the school knew. Every morning, Jalen arrived in clean clothes with a full backpack and completed homework because Imani made sure of it. She ironed his shirts on the dashboard when the windshield caught enough morning sun. She checked his math at 5:45 in the morning using the dome light. She made sure that nothing about her son's appearance at 8:15 when he walked through the school doors suggested anything about where he had been at midnight. Jalen did not tell anyone, not because Imani told him not to. She had never said a word about keeping it secret. He understood on his own. He was 9. He understood that if he told his teacher would call someone. And if someone got called, that someone might decide that a van was not a suitable place for children. And if that decision got made, the next decision might be to separate them. To put him and Nia and Carter somewhere that was not with their mother. He had done the math on that. Not with numbers, with fear. And the math told him silence was safer than help. He had started the notebook 3 days after his father died. Imani had taught him the exercise. Find one good thing every day. Write it down. Keep the list. On the first day, he wrote 2 entries. Number 1. Mom said we will be okay. Number 2. The sun came out after lunch. He was on number 52 now. 52 good things found in the middle of the worst thing that had ever happened to him. Some of them were small. Number 14. I found a quarter on the sidewalk. Some of them were ordinary. Number 31. Nia laughed at dinner. Some of them were the kind of thing a 9-year-old should not have to notice as remarkable. Number 44. Nobody asked where we live today. The notebook went everywhere he went. In his backpack during the day. Under his pillow at night. It was the one thing he owned that had nothing to do with what had been lost. It only contained what remained. Nia Carter, 6 years old, kindergarten at Garfield Elementary, same school as Jalen, different building. She remembered her father better than either of her brothers did because she was the one who had spent the most time watching him. She watched him cook. She watched him measure walls. She watched him carry Carter on his shoulders through the courtyard at Ridgewood Terrace on Saturday mornings when the swing set was too rusted to use and walking was the only ride available. She asked the question almost every night. Are we going home tomorrow? Imani had given every answer she had. We are working on it. Soon. Not yet, but soon. I promise we are going to find a place. She had run out of new ways to say the same thing. Nia kept asking anyway. Not because she expected a different answer. Because asking was the only way she knew to keep the idea of home alive. On the fogged windows of the van, Nia drew houses with her finger, a triangle roof, a square body, a door in the middle, a window on each side, sometimes a chimney, sometimes a tree. She drew the same house every night on the same window, and every morning the condensation dried and the house disappeared, and every night she drew it again. She did not know she was drawing a metaphor. She was 6. She was drawing what she wanted, and what she wanted vanished by morning, and she rebuilt it anyway. Because that is what you do when you are 6, and the only construction material you have is your finger, and the only canvas you have is fog. Carter, 2 years old. He did not remember the apartment at Ridgewood Terrace. He did not remember his father. He did not remember the back bedroom where he was born, or the courtyard with the rusted swing set, or the kitchen where his sister said her first word. He had no memory of a life before the van. For Carter, the van was not temporary. It was not in between. It was not the middle part of a story that had not finished yet. It was the whole story. It was the only world he had ever known. The seat was his bed. The parking lot was his yard. The McDonald's restroom was where mornings happened. His mother was always there. His brother was always there. His sister was always there. Nothing was missing. Nothing had been taken. The world was complete. That was the part that hurt the most. Not that her youngest child was living in a van, but that he had no idea anything was missing. Malcolm Davis was 52 years old. He grew up on the south side of Chicago in a 2-room apartment on 63rd Street that his mother rented for $420 a month. His father left when Malcolm was 4. He does not remember the leaving. He remembers the silence after it. A space in the apartment where a voice used to be and then was not. Dorothy Davis worked 3 jobs. Housekeeping at the Palmer House Hilton from 6 in the morning to 2 in the afternoon. Cashier at a Walgreens on Cottage Grove from 3 to 8. Laundry folding at a commercial cleaners on Stony Island from 9 at night until midnight. She slept 4 hours a night for 11 years. She never once called it sacrifice. She called it Tuesday. They were evicted for the first time when Malcolm was 8. The building was sold. New owner. Rent increase. Dorothy could not cover the difference. They moved to a smaller place on 69th Street. They were evicted again when he was 11. Same reason, different building, same math. The second eviction happened on a Thursday night in November. Dorothy loaded what she could into a 1996 Honda Civic with a cracked windshield and 214,000 miles on it. The shelters were full. She drove. Malcolm sat in the back seat and pretended to sleep. He did not sleep. He listened to his mother drive loops through the south side at 2 in the morning, then 3, then 4, because moving felt less like failing than sitting still. He heard her cry once, just once, very quietly. She thought he was asleep. He was not. Malcolm made a decision that night that he did not have words for until he was much older. He decided that he would never again be the person in the back seat. He would be the person who decided where people lived, not the person who got told. Scholarship to the University of Illinois. Finance degree. entry-level analyst at a real estate investment firm in San Francisco. 11 years of learning how property worked, not as shelter, as math, as leverage, as a system that rewarded the people who understood its language and punished the people who did not. He founded Vantage Point Capital at 41. The company did one thing well. It acquired underperforming residential properties, optimized them, and increased their value. Buy a building for $4 million. Renovate. Raise rents to market rate. Revalue at $7 or $8 million. Hold or sell. Clean, efficient, profitable. He called it creating better housing. And he was not entirely wrong. Some of the buildings were genuinely better after Vantage Point intervened. New plumbing, new wiring, updated kitchens, safer stairwells. Better for the people who could afford the new rent. The people who could not afford it were not in the spreadsheet. They were in the column labeled vacancy rate. They were in the line item called tenant turnover. They were numbers that went down so that other numbers could go up. Malcolm did not think of himself as someone who displaced people. He thought of himself as someone who fixed buildings. The difference between those two things is the difference between looking at a property through a spreadsheet and looking at it through a window. Malcolm had not looked through a window in a very long time. He lived alone. Penthouse on the Oakland Hills. No wife, no children. Not because he did not want them, because he had never stopped moving long enough to let them happen. Dorothy died 6 years ago. Heart failure. She was 68. She worked until she was 64. Malcolm paid for everything at the end. The best hospital, the best room. She died in a bed that cost more per night than the apartment on 63rd Street cost per month. He still drove at night, the same way Dorothy drove. No destination, no route, just the weight of the wheel, and the road sliding past, and the feeling of going somewhere without having to decide where. The car was different now. The reason was not. He did not know yet that the road would take him to a McDonald's parking lot on International Boulevard. He did not know that the woman sleeping in the van in that lot had been evicted from a building he owned. He did not know that the system he built to make sure he was never powerless again was the same system that had made her powerless. He would learn all of that soon, but not yet. Imani Carter was not unusual. That was the problem. On any given night in the United States, more than 172,000 families with children experience homelessness. That number comes from the Department of Housing and Urban Development. It is a count. It is not a measure. It does not capture the families sleeping in cars who never enter the shelter system. It does not capture the families doubled up in relatives' apartments or rotating between motels paid for week by week. The actual number is higher. Nobody knows how much higher because the people it describes are very good at not being counted. Many of them have jobs. That is the part that breaks the math people carry in their heads about how homelessness works. The assumption is that if you work, you can afford a place to live. In California, a worker earning minimum wage would need to work 89 hours per week to afford a 2-bedroom apartment at fair market rent. 89 hours. That is not a work week. That is 2 work weeks compressed into one with no sleep and no children and no transportation costs and no food. Imani worked 40 hours a week at $19.50 an hour. She earned roughly $34,000 a year before taxes. The average rent for a 2-bedroom apartment in Oakland in the year she was evicted was $2,100 per month. Her entire take-home pay would cover rent and almost nothing else. No gas, no food, no diapers, no school supplies, no margin, no room, no math that works. A single eviction record stays on a credit report for up to 7 years. It does not explain why you were evicted. It does not say your husband died and your income was cut in half. It does not say the building was sold and the rent was raised 40%. It does not say the code violation they cited had been there for 6 years and only became a problem when new ownership needed a legal reason to remove you. An eviction record does not tell the story of why someone lost their home. It just tells the next landlord that they did. And most landlords do not ask why. Imani had applied to 11 apartments in the 2 weeks before the eviction date. She was denied by all 11. 3 did not give a reason. 8 cited the pending eviction on her record. One leasing agent told her over the phone before she had even submitted the application that there was no point. "We do not rent to applicants with eviction history. It is company policy. Company policy." Those two words contain more cruelty per syllable than almost anything else in the English language. They mean the decision has already been made, and the person telling you about it is not the person who made it, and the person who made it will never meet you, and the meeting would not change anything if it happened. Imani knew this. She had learned it the way you learn everything about poverty, by living inside it and discovering that the exit signs were painted on. Malcolm got out of his car on the 6th night. He had spent 5 nights watching from 6 spaces away. 5 nights of details that arrived one at a time and accumulated into something he could no longer observe from a distance. The hand on the glass, the phone light, the woman braiding her daughter's hair on the asphalt at 5:30 in the morning. The McDonald's manager tapping the hood twice. The sound of a voice reading through a cracked window at 10 at night. He crossed the parking lot. 6 spaces. 42 feet of asphalt between his car and hers. His shoes made sounds on the pavement that he had never noticed before. Everything was louder at night in a parking lot when you did not know what you were doing. He stopped at the driver's side window. He raised his hand. He knocked twice, lightly. The same rhythm Deshawn used on the hood. Not aggressive, not demanding. 2 taps that said, "I am here, and I am not here to hurt you." 5 seconds of silence. Then, the blanket on the driver's side window moved. Not the whole blanket, a corner. Pulled back just enough for someone to look out. She looked at him. Her eyes were not afraid. They were calculating, measuring the distance between his hand and the door. Measuring the distance between his car and hers. Measuring him. She opened the door 3 inches. Not enough for him to reach inside. Enough to talk through. Her body was positioned between the gap and the back seat where her children were sleeping. "I know your car. You have been here before." Her voice was level. Not a question. A statement of evidence she had already collected. Malcolm had not prepared words. He had prepared nothing. He had crossed 42 feet of parking lot on an impulse that 5 nights of watching had built without his permission. He said the only true thing he had. "I saw the hand on the window." Imani looked at him. She looked at the Mercedes parked 6 spaces away. She looked back at him. "Are you watching us?" Her voice did not shake. Her voice had a blade in it. The kind of blade that belongs to a woman who has been watched before by men who did not come with good intentions and has learned that the first question is always the most important one, and the answer to it determines everything that comes next. Malcolm stood in the parking lot in a coat that cost more than her van was worth and said the most honest thing he had said in years. "I do not know what I am doing here." Imani looked at him for 3 more seconds. Then she closed the door. Not a slam, a decision. The blanket went back over the window. The conversation was over. Malcolm stood in the McDonald's parking lot and did not move. This was a feeling he had not had since he was 12 years old. Standing outside a car, at night, not knowing where to go or what to do, or whether the thing he had just done was right or wrong, or neither. A voice came from behind him. The side door of the McDonald's. Deshawn Okafor stood in the frame with his arms crossed and his manager's apron still on. "She do not need saving. She needs her apartment back." Malcolm turned. He looked at Deshawn. The parking lot light buzzed above them. What apartment? Deshawn looked at him for a long moment. Then he said a name and an address. Imani Carter, Ridgewood Terrace, International Boulevard. Malcolm drove home. He did not sleep. He opened his laptop at the kitchen counter of the penthouse on Oakland Hills. The city spread out below him through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Somewhere down in those lights, a woman was reading to 3 children in a van. He started searching. Alameda County eviction records, public access. He typed the name Deshawn had given him. Carter Imani T. The result appeared in 4 minutes. Eviction filed. Property, Ridgewood Terrace Apartments, 1400 block of International Boulevard, Oakland, California. Management company, Crestline Property Services. Malcolm knew Crestline. Crestline Property Services was the third-party management firm that Vantage Point Capital contracted to operate 23 residential properties across the Bay Area. Malcolm had signed that contract himself. 3 years ago. He had met the Crestline operations team once. He had reviewed their quarterly reports every 90 days since. He had never asked for the names of tenants. He had never needed to. He searched again. Property ownership records. Ridgewood Terrace Apartments, acquired by Vantage Point Capital LLC. Date of acquisition, 18 months ago. Purchase price, $4.2 million. Projected post-renovation value, $7.8 million. $7.8 million. He had seen that number before. It had been on a spreadsheet, column D, row 19. Projected asset value post-optimization. He had looked at that number 18 months ago in a conference room on the 14th floor of his office building in downtown Oakland. His acquisitions director had presented it alongside 11 other properties. Malcolm had reviewed the numbers. Occupancy rate, 67%, below market rents, deferred maintenance, significant upside potential. Significant upside potential. That was the phrase. That was the language he had used for the building where a boy took his first steps in a third-floor hallway, where a girl said her first word in the kitchen, where a baby was born in the back bedroom 5 weeks early while his father's hands shook. Malcolm had looked at the number and said one word: proceed. He did not know the name Imani Carter when he said it. He did not know the name Terrence Carter or Jalen Carter or Nia Carter or Carter Carter. He did not know that anyone had been born in that building, or taken first steps in that building, or said a first word in that building. He knew 42 units. He knew 67% occupancy. He knew below market rents. He knew significant upside potential. He closed the laptop. The screen went dark. The penthouse went dark. He sat at the kitchen counter in the silence of a home that had cost him $3.4 million and looked out the window at Oakland, spread below him like a map of everything he had ever wanted to control. Somewhere down in those lights on International Boulevard, in a parking lot behind a McDonald's, a woman he had never met was sleeping in a van that his company had put her in. She was reading to her children from a book her dead mother had written in. She was calling it In Between. She was telling them it was not forever. Malcolm sat in the dark for a long time. He did not move. He did not reach for the laptop. He did not call anyone. He just sat with the knowledge that the thing he had built to make sure no one ever decided where he lived again was the exact thing that had decided where Imani Carter and her 3 children lived tonight. He had spent his career making sure he would never be evicted again. He had not considered that the way to guarantee that was to become the person who did the evicting. The next morning, Malcolm opened the full Vantage Point portfolio on his desktop. 23 properties. He had never looked at all of them at once. He had always looked at them one at a time. One spreadsheet. One set of projections. One acquisition memo. One approval. That was how the work was designed. You never saw the whole picture because the whole picture was never the point. The point was the next deal. He opened them all. Every property report, every tenant displacement log filed by Crestline Property Services over the past 3 years. 14 of the 23 buildings had been through what the reports called optimization. That word appeared on every summary page. Optimization. It meant the same thing every time. Acquire, inspect, identify code violations that had existed for years without enforcement, issue rent adjustments to market rate, file eviction proceedings against tenants who could not pay the new rate or whose units failed the newly enforced code, renovate, relist at higher rents, report increased asset value to investors. 14 buildings. 341 families displaced across 3 years. Malcolm read the number and read it again. 341. Not a single step in the process had been illegal. Every rent increase was within the allowable percentage under California law. Every code enforcement action was documented by a licensed inspector. Every eviction was processed through the Alameda County Superior Court. Every filing had been reviewed by Vantage Point's legal team before submission. He called Lorraine Voss. She was the director of operations at Crestline. She had managed the Vantage Point account since the contract was signed. She picked up on the second ring. Malcolm asked about Ridgewood Terrace. Lorraine answered the way she answered every question. Calmly. Precisely. Without hesitation. Rent adjustment was market aligned based on comparable units within a half-mile radius. Code violations were flagged during the post-acquisition inspection and reported to the city as required. Evictions were processed through court. Tenants were given the legally mandated notice period. Relocation assistance was offered where applicable. Everything was by the book, Mr. Davis. Malcolm was quiet for a moment. Then he asked a question he had never asked about any property in his portfolio. How many families were in the building when we acquired it? Lorraine paused. Not long, just long enough to check a file. 42 units, approximately 38 occupied at the time of acquisition. How many are still there? A longer pause this time, not because she did not know, because she understood what the number meant when you said it out loud. 7. 38 families. 7 remaining. 31 gone. In 18 months. Through a process that was entirely legal and entirely documented and entirely approved and entirely devastating. Malcolm did not respond. Lorraine waited for 5 seconds. Then she asked if there was anything else. Malcolm said no. He hung up. There is a term for what happened at Ridgewood Terrace. It is called renoviction. It describes the practice of using building code enforcement or planned renovations as legal grounds to displace existing tenants, typically those paying below market rent, in order to renovate units and relist them at significantly higher prices. It is legal in most states. It is common in California. According to the National Low-Income Housing Coalition, the United States loses more than 900,000 affordable housing units every year to conversion, demolition, or rent increases that push existing tenants out. The buildings do not disappear. The people inside them do. Malcolm sat at his desk and looked at the portfolio spread across his screen. 23 buildings, 14 optimized, 341 families. Each building had been a spreadsheet. Each spreadsheet had once been a community. He had turned communities into spreadsheets and called it creating value. He had not done it with cruelty. He had done it with efficiency. And efficiency, when applied to places where people live without asking who lives there, is its own kind of cruelty, the kind that never has to look at what it does, because the numbers always look clean. Malcolm came back to the McDonald's on the 7th night. He did not park 6 spaces away. He parked near the side entrance and went inside. Deshawn was behind the counter. The restaurant was nearly empty. 2 teenagers sharing fries in a booth. A man asleep in the corner with a coffee cup he had not touched. Malcolm walked to the counter. Deshawn looked at him the way he had looked at him 2 nights ago. Patient, watchful, not impressed. Malcolm spoke quietly. He told Deshawn who he was, not his name. Deshawn already knew his name from the Mercedes registration he had looked up the night Malcolm first showed up. He told Deshawn what he had found: the building, the company, the connection. He told him he needed to talk to Imani, not from a car window, not in a parking lot, at a table, like 2 people. Deshawn looked at him for a long time. Then he said 3 words: "I will ask." He walked out to the van. He was gone for 10 minutes. Malcolm stood at the counter and did not order anything, and did not sit down, and did not check his phone. He just stood there, waiting the way you wait when you know you have no right to ask for what you are asking for, but you are asking anyway. Deshawn came back in. He nodded once. She is coming. 4 minutes later, Imani walked through the side door. She was wearing the same jacket she wore every night. Her hair was pulled back. Her face carried the particular stillness of a woman who has agreed to something she does not trust and is prepared to leave the moment it proves her right. Deshawn stood near the door, close enough to the van to hear the children if they woke, close enough to the restaurant to come inside if he needed to. Imani sat down across from Malcolm at the corner booth. Malcolm had ordered a coffee for her. She did not touch it. She put her hands flat on the table and looked at him the way she had looked at him through the car window. Measuring. Malcolm did not start with small talk. He did not start with an apology. He started with the truth. The building you lived in, Ridgewood Terrace. It is owned by a company called Vantage Point Capital. He paused. Imani did not move. That is my company. Imani looked at him. She did not blink. She did not gasp. She did not cry. She looked at him the way a person who has been pushed off a ledge looks at the person who built the ledge when they finally meet face to face. Not surprise, recognition, the slow, terrible recognition of a pattern completing itself. She was quiet for 8 seconds. Malcolm counted them. Then she asked one question. Did you know our names? No. Imani looked at him, at his coat, at his watch, at his hands on the table. Then she said something that was not a question. That is the problem, is it not? The restaurant was quiet. The fluorescent lights hummed. The teenagers had stopped talking. The man in the corner was still asleep. I am not here to offer you money, Malcolm said. Good. Because I do not want your money. I am here because what happened to you was wrong, and I did it, not personally. But I built the machine that did it, and I want to fix it, starting with you. Imani looked at him for a very long time. Her hands were still flat on the table. Her coffee was still untouched. Then she spoke, and what she said was the thing that changed the size of what Malcolm thought he was doing. Starting with me means you are going to have to explain to me why 31 other families are not sitting at this table too. Malcolm did not have an answer for that, not yet, but the question sat between them on the table like a document that required a signature. And he understood in that moment that whatever he did next could not be for one woman in a parking lot. It had to be for everyone his machine had touched. Imani stood up. She did not say goodbye. She did not say thank you. She walked out the side door and crossed the parking lot to the van where her children were sleeping. Deshaun watched her go. Then he looked at Malcolm. Malcolm sat in the booth for another 11 minutes. The coffee Imani did not drink grew cold across from him. He did not touch it either. He left it there, 2 full cups on a table, neither one consumed. He did not know yet what that meant. But he would. Imani opened the driver's door of the van and climbed in quietly. She pulled it shut behind her with the practiced softness of a woman who had learned exactly how many decibels a car door makes when you close it with a sleeping 2-year-old 3 feet away. Jalen was not asleep. He was lying on his side with his eyes open, watching the gap between the front seats. When Imani's face appeared, he did not smile. He searched. Where were you? Not curiosity. Inventory. The same way he checked his backpack every morning. The same way he counted the applesauce pouches in the trunk every night. Making sure everything was still where it was supposed to be. Making sure the math still worked. I was talking to someone. About us. About a lot of things. Jalen looked at her for 3 seconds. He was reading her face the way he read everything. For data. For shifts. For the difference between what she said and what she meant. He found whatever he was looking for. He nodded once. He turned back to his notebook. Nia stirred. Her eyes opened halfway. She looked at Imani from the middle seat with the unfocused gaze of a child pulled out of sleep by the sound of a door she had learned to listen for. Are we going home tomorrow? The last time she asked, Imani had said we are going somewhere better. That was 7 weeks ago. She had used that answer and its variations for 49 nights. Tonight, she was quiet for 5 seconds. Then she said something different. I am working on it, baby. Nia looked at her. Her eyes were open now. She held the look for a moment, then she closed her eyes and turned her face into the pillow, and was asleep before she could ask anything else. Jalen heard it. He heard the difference. He opened the notebook. The phone flashlight was already on. He found the next blank line. Number 53. Mom came back. Below it, in smaller handwriting, pressed closer to the line, as if he was trying to make it fit inside something private. Number 54. She said she is working on it. That is different from what she usually says. He closed the notebook. He put the pen in the spiral binding. He turned off the light. He lay on his back and looked at the ceiling of the van and listened to his mother settle into the driver's seat. Imani reached into the pocket behind the seat and pulled out the Maya Angelou book. She opened it. She read quietly. The same poems she had been reading for 49 nights. The same voice. The same cadence. The children knew the sound of it the way they knew the sound of the engine starting, and the sound of the blanket going up, and the sound of the parking lot at night when everything was as close to safe as it was going to get. She turned to page 43. Her mother's handwriting. Blue ink, slanting to the right. Home is not an address. Home is the voice that reads to you at night. She looked at the sentence. She had read it aloud every night since the first night in the van. 49 times. She had read it as a promise, as evidence, as the one thing she could offer her children that did not require a lease or a credit check or a landlord's approval. Tonight, she did not read it aloud. She looked at it. She held the book open on her lap and sat in the dark and looked at her mother's handwriting and wondered something she had never wondered before. She had always assumed Renee wrote that sentence as philosophy, as something true and beautiful and worth preserving in the margin of a poem. Tonight, for the first time, she wondered if her mother had written it for a moment exactly like this one. If Renee had known what it was to have no address. If the sentence was not philosophy at all but survival. If her mother had written it not because it was beautiful but because she needed it to be true. Imani closed the book. She put it back in the pocket behind the seat. She leaned her head against the window and closed her eyes. She did not sleep. She listened to her children breathing, 3 sets of lungs in a sealed car. The sound of the world she was holding together with her voice and her hands, and the stubborn refusal to let the math win. Outside, the parking lot was quiet. The McDonald's sign buzzed. The fog was coming in off the bay. In 6 hours, she would wake them. She would comb Nia's hair. She would check Jalen's homework. She would carry Carter on her hip. She would drive them to school. She would make it look like nothing was wrong. But tonight, something was different. She did not know yet what it would become. She only knew that the word she had used with Nia was different from every word she had used before. Working on it, not someday, not somewhere better. Working on it, present tense, active, a thing being done rather than a thing being waited for. She did not know yet if it would be enough, but it was different. And in a van in a parking lot, after 49 nights of the same different, was the closest thing to hope she had. Malcolm called Vantage Point's legal department at 7:15 the next morning. He gave 3 instructions. Stop all pending eviction proceedings across all 23 properties. Pull the complete displacement records for every building Crestline had managed over the past 3 years. And schedule a call with the CFO for 9 o'clock. The CFO's name was Nathan Gill. He had been with Vantage Point for 6 years. He was good at his job. His job was to make numbers go in the right direction. He called at 9:02. Malcolm told him what he wanted. A full audit. A moratorium on rent increase evictions. A fund. Nathan was quiet for 4 seconds. Then he asked the question his job required him to ask. What is the business case? There is not one. Nathan was quiet again. Longer this time. Then he said he would start the audit. He did not ask again. Malcolm hired Samara Obi, 38 years old, tenant rights attorney with the Legal Aid Society of Alameda County. She had spent 11 years representing tenants in eviction proceedings and had never once been retained by a landlord. She said so on the phone. Malcolm said he understood. He asked her to look at the Ridgewood Terrace file anyway. Samara reviewed the records in 3 days. Her conclusion was precise. The evictions were technically legal. Every filing followed the statutory process. Every notice met the required timeline. Every code violation cited in the eviction proceedings was real. But the pattern told a different story. The code violations at Ridgewood Terrace had existed for years under the previous ownership without triggering enforcement. They were flagged only after Vantage Point acquired the building, only after the rent increase had been implemented, only after tenants who could not pay the new rate needed a legal reason to be removed. The same pattern appeared at 14 other properties. Acquire, inspect, find violations that had been there for years, use the violations as legal grounds, process the eviction, renovate, relist. In some cities, this practice has a name. It is called renoviction, the use of renovation or code enforcement as a mechanism to legally displace tenants paying below market rent. Some municipalities have responded with right of return ordinances. San Francisco requires landlords to offer displaced tenants the right to return to their units after renovation at the original rent. Los Angeles has similar protections. Oakland at the time of Imani Carter's eviction did not. Malcolm did not wait for Oakland to pass a law. He created one inside his own company. He established the Vantage Point Restoration Fund, $12 million. The fund had 4 objectives. First, locate and contact every family displaced from a Vantage Point managed property over the past 3 years. 341 households across 14 buildings. Second, provide relocation assistance to any displaced family still in need. Third, work with the Alameda County courts to petition for the sealing or vacating of eviction records, where the underlying eviction was tied to a post-acquisition code enforcement action. Fourth, implement a right of return policy for Ridgewood Terrace and all future renovation projects in the Vantage Point portfolio. Former tenants would be offered their units back at their original rental rate upon completion of renovation. Samara Obi made the calls, not Malcolm. Malcolm understood that this was not about him. It was not about the relationship between a billionaire and a woman in a parking lot. It was about a system that had broken something and a system that could be rebuilt to fix it. The calls went out from the Legal Aid Society. Samara's team reached 212 of the 341 households within 6 weeks. Some had found housing, some had not. Some had left Oakland entirely. Some had left California. 11 were living in vehicles. 23 were in shelters. 41 were doubled up with family members in apartments that did not have room for them. Imani Carter received a call from Samara Obi on a Tuesday afternoon. She was in the McDonald's parking lot. The children were at school. She was sitting in the driver's seat with the engine off and the windows cracked, reading a booklet about affordable housing applications that she had picked up at the public library 3 days earlier. The call lasted 14 minutes. Samara explained the fund, the right of return, the timeline for Ridgewood Terrace renovation, the rent. Imani listened without interrupting. When Samara finished, Imani asked one question. Is this for everyone, or just for me? For everyone we can reach, Samara said. You are the 14th call I have made today. Imani was quiet for a moment. Then she said thank you. Then she hung up. She sat in the van for another 6 minutes. She did not move. She did not call anyone. She looked at the booklet in her lap, and then she looked at the parking lot, and then she looked at the rearview mirror where she could see the car seats in the back, where her children slept every night. She did not cry. She had made a rule about that a long time ago. Not in front of the van, not where the parking lot could see. But her hands were shaking, and she let them. 4 months later, on a Saturday morning in October, Imani Carter pulled the van into the parking lot of Ridgewood Terrace. She turned off the engine. She looked at the building. 3 stories, same brick, same entrance, new windows, new paint at the frames. A building that had been waiting for people to come back to it and had started showing the cost of waiting. 22 of the original 38 households returned. Imani was the 14th. The renovation had been completed under a revised plan. 70% of units designated affordable at the original rental rates, 30% at market rate. Vantage Point absorbed the difference. The projected return on the property dropped from $7.8 million to $4.1 million. Malcolm signed the revised projection without asking anyone to explain the loss. There was no loss. There was a correction. Imani walked through the front door. The lobby had new tile. The mailboxes were new. Her name was already on Unit 312. 3rd floor. Same unit. She took the stairs. The staircase was the same. The railing was the same. Her hand knew it. Her feet knew the steps. 14 up. Turn. 14 more. Turn. 14 more. 3rd floor. She opened the door to the apartment. The kitchen was new. New cabinets. New countertop. New stove. But the layout was the same. The window above the sink was in the same place. She stood where Nia had been sitting in a high chair when she said her first word, more. She stood where Terrence had stood with a spoon and a pot of rice on his last Saturday morning in this kitchen. She walked into the living room. The window still faced the courtyard. The old swing set was gone. A new one stood in its place. Bright blue. The chains did not rust. She walked into the back bedroom. The room where Carter was born at 3:17 in the morning 5 weeks early while his father's hands shook. The room had a new window. It met the egress code. The window that had been used to remove her from this apartment was now the window that proved the apartment was safe. She stood in front of it for a long time. Nia ran in first. She went straight for the room that had been hers before she could remember it being hers. She stopped in the doorway. She looked around. She turned and ran back to Imani in the hallway. Are we going home tomorrow? Imani knelt down. She was eye level with her daughter. She had heard that question every night for 4 months. She had answered it with soon and somewhere better, and I am working on it. She had answered it with every word she had, except the right one. We are already here, baby. Nia looked at her. She looked at the room behind her. She looked back at Imani, then she walked into the room and sat down on the floor in the middle of it and did not move. She sat there, the way a person sits in a place they have been looking for. Not doing anything. Just being in it. Jalen walked into his room. He set his backpack on the floor. He unzipped it. He took out the composition notebook. He held it for a moment. Then he placed it on the desk. A real desk. In a real room. With a lamp that plugged into a wall and a window that faced the courtyard and a door he could close. He opened the notebook. He looked at the pages. 54 entries. 54 good things found in the middle of the worst thing that had ever happened to him. He did not write anything. He just looked at the notebook sitting on the desk. The notebook had lived in a backpack, and under a pillow, and in the dark of a van for 4 months. Now it was on a desk, in a room, in a home. He closed it. He did not need to write right now. The notebook could wait. It had never been able to wait before. Carter walked through the living room, touching everything. The wall, the window, the edge of the couch that had been delivered that morning. He touched the curtain and pulled it and laughed when it moved. He did not know this apartment. He did not remember it. He did not know that he had been born in the back bedroom, or that his father had caught him with shaking hands, or that his sister had said her first word in the kitchen, or that his brother had taken his first steps in the hallway, outside. For Carter, this was a new place. Every place was new. He did not know this was a return. He just knew his mother was smiling, and his mother's smile was enough to make any room feel like it had always been his. That night, the first night, the children slept in beds. Beds, real sheets, real pillows, real walls. Nia fell asleep first, then Carter, then Jalen. He was always the last one. Imani sat on the edge of Jalen's bed. She reached into the bag she had not yet unpacked and pulled out the Maya Angelou book. She opened it. She read. The same poems, the same voice, the same rhythm the children knew the way they knew her breathing and the sound of a door closing gently. She turned to page 43. Her mother's handwriting. Blue ink. Slanting to the right. Home is not an address. Home is the voice that reads to you at night. She read it out loud. For the first time in a real home. For the first time with walls that belonged to her and a lease with her name on it and a door that locked from the inside. Her voice did not shake. It was just fuller than usual. As if the sentence had been waiting for a room that deserved it. Jalen's eyes were closed. But he was not asleep. He was listening. He heard the sentence. He had heard it every night for 4 months. But tonight it sounded different. Tonight it sounded like it was true in a way it had not been true before. Not because the words had changed. Because the room had. Imani closed the book. She kissed his forehead. She turned off the light. She closed the door. Jalen waited. He listened to her footsteps move down the hallway. He heard her open her own bedroom door. He heard it close. Then he reached over and turned on the desk lamp. Not a phone flashlight. A lamp. It made a circle of warm light on the desk and on the notebook sitting in the middle of it. He opened to the next blank page. Number 55. Things that are still good, he wrote slowly. The pen moved across the paper in handwriting that was steadier than it had been 4 months ago. Steadier than it had been the night he started. Number 55. I can hear Mom reading from my own room. He looked at the line. He looked at the notebook. He looked at the 54 entries that came before this one. Every good thing he had found since his father died and his home disappeared, and his world became a van in a parking lot behind a McDonald's. Then below number 55, he wrote one more line. He did not give it a number. It did not belong to the list. It belonged to something else. Something the list had been pointing toward the whole time without him knowing it. I think maybe everything on this list was always her. He closed the notebook. He turned off the lamp. He lay back on the bed. His bed. In his room. In his home. The ceiling was white. The room was dark. The apartment was quiet. Somewhere down the hall, his mother was lying in a bed that was not a reclined car seat for the first time in 4 months. He listened to the silence of a place that was not a parking lot. No engine noise. No fluorescent lights buzzing. No cars pulling in and out. Just a building settling into itself at night, the way buildings do. And his mother breathing somewhere behind a wall that was hers. Malcolm Davis drove that night. The old habit. The steering wheel. The empty road. He took International Boulevard because it was the route his body knew now. He passed the McDonald's at 11:22. He slowed down without deciding to. The parking lot was lit by the same sodium lights. The drive-through window was closed. 2 cars near the entrance. The delivery truck idling by the dumpsters. The far corner, by the chain-link fence, where the overhead light was burned out, where the van had parked at exactly the right angle to be in the camera's view, but out of the light's reach. The space was empty. No van, no fogged windows, no blanket over the rear glass, no hand pressing against the inside of the window. Malcolm stopped the Mercedes in the lot. He looked at the empty space for a long time. He did not know that Imani had moved into Ridgewood Terrace that morning. He did not know that Nia had asked her question for the last time. He did not know about the notebook or the lamp or the sentence that did not have a number. He just knew the van was not there. And, for the first time in weeks, he drove home and slept. Malcolm Davis built a company that displaced 341 families and called it Progress. Imani Carter slept in a car with 3 children and called it In Between. Society honored one of them with a Forbes profile. The other one was asked to move her car by 6 in the morning. Think about who we call successful. Think about who we call homeless. Then think about which one of them was actually building something. The cruelest part of what happened to Imani Carter is not what she survived. It is how ordinary her story is. She did everything right. She worked. She paid rent. She raised her children. She kept them fed and clothed and in school. And the system that was supposed to hold people like her decided she was in the way of a better return on investment. And nobody in the system had to feel bad about it because nobody in the system ever learned her name. There is a parking lot somewhere near you tonight with a car that has been there too long. The windows are fogged. Someone inside is reading to a child. You will drive past it tomorrow and you will not see it. Most people do not. That is not cruelty. It is distance. And distance is something we can choose to close. This story is fiction. The names are not real, but the statistics are. And the situation, a working mother living in her car because an eviction destroyed her ability to rent, is happening right now to hundreds of thousands of families across this country. I wrote this because I believe stories can do what statistics alone cannot. They make you see a person where you used to see a number. If this one did that for you, it did what I needed it to do. If this story stayed with you, send it to someone who needs to hear it. If it made you angry not at a character, but at a system, good. That anger has a direction. Subscribe. I will see you in the next one.